I think my subconscious designs everything. So what I like to do is be shown, let's say, plans of some new restaurants we're designing and then just walk away. And I believe over the next 2 days, the subconscious has designed the whole thing, because I can then come back into a meeting without not actually sat down with a pen and paper and said, right, now I must design this bar. I will come back to a meeting with the team and go, I was thinking we should do X, Y, Z.
Welcome to Season 2 of Things I've Learned, the podcast in which we explore how the inner worlds of designers, architects, and creatives shape the world around us. Across our first season, I had conversations with 6 pioneering creatives at the very top of their game, charting what they've learned about success, how they navigate failure, and of course, how they view design. Now it's time for more, with a new cohort of industry leaders, and I can't wait to hear what lessons they have to share. I'm Harry McKinley. Now, I'm usually allergic to the kind of platitudes that sometimes litter LinkedIn, even more so if they make it onto a piece of driftwood. Hallmark wisdom just isn't really my bag, but there is one quote that actually rings true. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And the reason it's probably deployed so much in design circles is because we all know that bringing any idea, project, or product to life takes a village. And yet, when it comes to the creative industries, the greatest recognition and plaudits tend to be reserved for individuals. We talk about singular visions. We celebrate the lone genius. And of course, most designers feel they've truly made it when it's their name above the door. It takes a village to realize a vision, but in the end, only one villager gets a statue. That push and pull between design as a collaborative craft and the role of the design visionary is something we'll explore a bit more this episode, as our guest Shayne Brady has run the gamut from working within a big name practice to co-founding a design studio and then going it alone. Shayne worked as a senior designer under David Collins before co-founding Brady Williams alongside Emily Williams, working on landmark projects such as the Aubrey at Mandarin Oriental Hyde Park and on interiors for Harrods. And now, as of this year, he's leading the fully eponymous studio Shayne Brady, recently completing the Savoy's new destination gallery space. So, firstly, tell me, Shayne, how does it feel to go it alone?
Scary, daunting. Actually really empowering as well. I mean, it doesn't feel alone for me, if I'm really honest. As you mentioned, I co-founded with Emily in the start of 2013, Brady Williams. And I think that when Emily and I decided to go on our new journeys separately, but also still together because we're great friends, very little changed in some ways for me because we had the studio, I had the team. So for me, it was the next chapter as opposed to a brand new start. But yeah, the name above the door or the name on the wall is certainly an interesting thought. I had a lot of kind of internal thinking about what the name should be and took a lot of advice from friends, colleagues, people in the industry, clients. And I think that people do buy into a name and a person, but you'll see on our logo, the placement of Shayne Brady versus studio was quite strategic by the end, in that studio is the focus, studio is the bigger word, studio is in bold, studio is what it's about. And I happen to be the byline of that movie or that play. So I'm there, but it's the studio that make this entire operation roll.
Ooh, well, we're going to talk a bit more about that. But first, a message. Finding a quiet place at work for a private meeting or deep focused work shouldn't feel like navigating Piccadilly Circus. Bureau builds modular booths that aren't just privacy pods. They're flexible, high-performing environments designed for deep focus, quick calls, or team huddles. Built from sustainable materials, flat-packed for low-impact shipping, and crafted to last. From co-working floors to corporate offices and beyond, Bureau creates workspaces that, well, work. And with a human team guiding you from first quote to final install, change is refreshingly straightforward. See what's possible at withbureau.com. Let's talk about success, Shayne. You mentioned this tension over what to call the studio, but I do wonder if having your name, just your name, above the door feels like success to you.
I think that we live in a world where people are always striving for the next thing. I currently in my life am trying to find success in every day. So the smaller elements of every day, as opposed to I'll feel successful if we win an award for the Savoy. I'll feel successful if I open Studio Shayne Brady in Miami. So yes, I think it's a huge milestone in 2025 to have the name on the door. And it was funny, I came back from a few days break recently and the name has changed on the doorbell outside the studio because all of these things take time. And there was a little pinch me moment of, oh, there's my name and my studio on the door, and this is where we're at. And I think it's really important when we can live in such a world of fast-paced, constant, to take a moment and a breath and go, we're at this point, and this is really nice, and this is success. So yes, in one regard, having the name on the wall is a huge success. But I think if I'm the pragmatic or the negative voice in my head as well, I'm an Irish boy born in the countryside of Ireland. We don't really pat ourselves on the back and say, well done, you're a success. We keep working hard.
You mentioned looking for little successes in the day. That's a lovely idea. Is that because you feel like having your name above the door, that that's the pinnacle of success now? So now it's finding those little successes in every day.
I mean, God, Harry, this is like a therapy session. I love it. It could be.
I need to get a chaise long in the exactly. Things I've learned studio.
I mean, I co-founded the first studio with Emily when I was only 29. So I think maybe I've got to this point in my mind at a young age, maybe not. But I think it's more about being present in the moment. I write notes to my future self on big Post-its, because I love big Post-its. Look, there's some right here. There's always big Post-its. And I put them on the fridge for me to read the next morning. And that is very much about success and failure and aspiration. So they're more my little successes in the day.
What does a little success look like?
Motivating a team member who's lost their way in a design, answering that niggling gut feeling that there's a problem with a design that's been playing away with me, and finally getting out in the open and saying, there's a problem with this. We need to try solve this. So, that little thing of brick by brick, you build the vision. The same with that. All of those small little successes get us to a big old success, which may be the name above the door. It may be the studio in Miami. It may be the award for the Savoy. I'm really manifesting this award for the Savoy, haven't I? So, yeah.
Well, let's take it back because you mentioned, of course, you did found Brady Williams alongside Emily. So your name was above the door. You were just sharing it. There's a quote by Patsy Stone from AbFab that I enjoy. It's become a running theme that I try and get as many AbFab quotes into each season as I possibly can. But it's a quote about successful people. And she says, you can't put two racehorses in the stable together because they'll kick the shit out of each other. What do you think about that? Because you obviously managed to sustain as a duo with Emily for over a decade. How was that?
Now looking back, realize how great Emily's and I's synergy was over 11, 12 years. I think what made us great was we were friends at the start. We were then very clear with what the vision of the studio should be, but we also were very clear in that my forte is hospitality design, restaurants, bars, hotels, some retail, some spa. And her forte is very much residential, branded residences, show apartments. So we kind of had our two lanes and we had a wonderful umbrella, at which point we could really mold our visions in our areas successfully. Because I kind of agree with that quote. I think two racehorses in one stable can beat each other up. But I think because we had clear parameters, there was a respect for each other's lanes.
Did that teach you anything about what it means to collaborate successfully that you've been able to apply perhaps in your working life now?
The biggest thing I always say about collaboration, it's listening. You have to listen to what people are saying and also not what you think they're saying. Because I think as humans, we have a thing of we think they're saying such and such, but we're not fully listening to actually what they're saying. You have to listen to the other person. You don't have to agree with them, of course, but you have to try understand why are they feeling this particular way? What is important to them or what is not important to them?
Well, one of the things I can't imagine that you would have heard a lot growing up in rural County Kildare was, oh, you're going to be a luxury interior designer. It's not the natural breeding ground necessarily for someone who has worked on the types of projects that you have. What did success look like for you growing up?
So I think growing up, and yes, you are right, rural Ireland, brought up in a bungalow in a field in a lovely part of Kildare. I always had a really strong imagination. I was always creative. I was always making up games or doing arts and crafts. And then when I was 14 maybe actually, my older brother was in university. He was living in Dublin and he took me as a treat to see Les Miserables, which had come from the West End, and I was blown away. My whole world changed, I think, with Les Mis, because for me, it was this whole magical make-believe set, for want of a better word. And growing up, we didn't go to luxury restaurants, luxury hotels. That wasn't the lifestyle. So for me, Les Mis opened my eyes to this kind of world I'd never even known about. So from then, I actually wanted to be a set designer. Not really a career for that in Ireland. I mean, there possibly is now, but in terms of if you think of Dublin versus London and the West End, I mean, they're different beasts.
And you're just not a very theatrical person, Shayne.
I'm not.
No.
I'm very subdued, very quiet, very shy in a room. So as a result, I sort of started to want to do this, but I also had a passion for spaces and 3D. So I ended up going into an interior architecture in Dublin, but still with no idea that I would end up in luxury hospitality. But it's been a journey, I suppose, that's evolved over time. And I still really want to, at some point, design stage sets. But luxury hospitality, or hospitality to begin with, became my stage sets. I suppose with luxury, there's a bigger ability to create something super magical. Not even in terms of money, but yes, often there is more money to play with. But we're working with either Great Dane hotels or new build brands that really want to create something special. So there's the ability to let the imagination run wild and loose, which is back to that night at the Point Theatre in Dublin with the turning set of Les Mis turning and all of the sets coming in. It's that ability.
But you really wanted it. I mean, it didn't just happen by accident. And with David Collins, for example, you knocked on the door there a couple of times before you got the gig. Did that teach you anything about perseverance?
I knew at the time, and before, when I was turned away at David Collins, I went to work for a company called RPW, which is where I met Emily. So I'm very much, everything happens for a reason, but you have to have conviction in where you want to go. And I knew at the time that David Collins was the pinnacle of hospitality and restaurant design. So for me, I knew I wanted to get there. So I think it's about having conviction in your thought and getting there, but also not in a, I demand this. It's also in a, I'm working hard and I feel I can get there and I want to get there. But I still, to this day, will have like Adele imposter syndrome. I will stand in a meeting with certain clients and go, why is little Shayne Brady from the field in Ireland in this room with these people designing this? I can't do it. But then I pick myself up and I can do it.
Well, you must have pinch me moments then. So what perhaps was your first taste of success, and what have been some of the pinch me moments since?
One that stands out once we'd set up a new studio, we were going to set up a new studio, was Jeremy King calling me to say, I'd love to talk to you about a new project. I'd, of course, worked with Jeremy at David Collins, and we'd done some great projects with David and myself and the team at David Collins. But when Jeremy called post that and said, I'd like to meet you for a coffee and talk about things, I thought, oh, if this man who has created iconic restaurants in London, from the Ivy and Caprice in the 80s up to the Wolseley and then the Delaunay, wants to talk to me, that is a real pinch me moment. I think another pinch me moment when we signed to do the Savoy, because I always remember I came to London at 16 on a trip with a friend and their family to see a show. And I always remember seeing the iconic neon green Savoy sign on the Strand and it being seen as a landmark of London. And so I think then some 20 odd years later, to be sat at the Savoy signing a contract to design one of the rooms in its heart is a real pinch me moment of my career.
Once you've achieved those types of benchmarks, does the bar for what success looks like move?
Well, and that comes back to my first point. You do. So you have to stop a little and say, hang on, today's success is picking a great color. Today's success is not signing up a brand new concept on a new island they've made off the coast of Bali. There has to be something that stops that, because otherwise you're always running on the hamster wheel. I think for me, having done things like the Park for Jeremy or the Savoy or the Mandarin Oriental, we've got new projects coming up with the Waldorf Astoria this year, which is really exciting. You know, they are great names and they are great people to work with. What gets me excited is the constant new teams and dynamics and the collaborations, but also looking at what else we can do that doesn't necessarily need to be higher, but that interests me. So there's something I can't talk about at the moment because it's under massive NDA. It's not a stage set yet, but it's adjacent to the theatre world. And that gets me really excited because we've sort of done it before, but not in this context. And how are we taking what we in the studio have learned over the past 20 years of my career and now putting it into this, which is an exciting new challenge.
And that feels like a full circle moment for that young boy who was drawn into design through theatre to now be able to develop something like that.
1,000,000%. Yeah. And I think the final cherry full circle moment is if I do design a stage set for, I aim high. So National Theatre or something, but we'll see.
Well, we've talked about the peachy stuff, success, and next we'll talk a little bit about the other side of the coin, failure. But first, a message. Mix Interiors is the leading platform for commercial interior design and architecture, in print and online. We feature the people shaping and reshaping the world around us. Explore the latest projects setting the bar for exceptional design and showcase the products at the very forefront of innovation and creativity. For more information on how to subscribe in print or to view the latest digital content, head to mixinteriors.com. So, Shayne, what does failure look like to you?
I always grew up not wanting to be wrong or in trouble. So I think that's wrapped in failure, if you know what I mean. If you're wrong or if you're in trouble, you've failed. I'm reading a book at the moment called The Courage to Be Disliked, which is a really interesting read. Because for me, I have failed if I walk into a design presentation and the client doesn't like the design. But what we do is subjective. So they're not going to like all of the design. In the 20 years I've been doing this, there's probably been 2 home runs where they loved everything. But even then, 3 months later, 4 months later, things tweak. They kind of go back and go, we don't really love where the upholstery is going or whatever it be. And so what I've had to learn in myself is to accept that you're human and things go wrong and things can fail. And that doesn't make you any less of a person, but it's how you deal with them or fix them. So yeah, failure is tough.
Can you think of a specific example of when you've experienced failure and perhaps what you learned from it?
So this is going well back, junior designer days at RPW. I remember we were designing a restaurant and bar in a hotel. And shop drawings come in, which we sign off before things go into manufacture and production. I was too young in my career to be signing these off. That's through no fault of anybody, but I was, and I signed them off. And I signed off all the tables without checking the seat height. And so all of the tables for the restaurant were built at the wrong height, which meant that you couldn't get your knees or your legs underneath the tables. That is a visceral memory. And now literally the team is drilled into them: seat heights, table heights, wall lights on the wall not hitting your head. And I think that, I suppose, failure makes you do better the next time. What's really hard as the owner of a studio is you don't really want your designers going out and making failures constantly, because it's costing somebody money, us or the client or the projects. But mistakes do happen. As I say, we are only human. And I think that in our line of work, we generally design 95% of it in terms of every chair, every light, every chandelier, every rug. Everything is designed. So you're not working with some things that you know are tried and tested. You're kind of working with a lot of constantly moving parts.
But of course, previously when you co-founded Brady Williams, of course, even though you each had your own lane, I imagine that in many ways you still had Emily to lean on if things weren't quite going perfectly. Do you feel more pressure now that it's just your name above the door? Does navigating failure perhaps feel like a lonelier experience?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Harry, actually, because, of course, the new studio has been since May 1st. So we still are in the infancy of knowing what that feels like, but it definitely does feel different. Emily and I always had each other's back to bounce reassurances off each other or discuss problems that we're each having on our projects or on our side and say, well, why don't you try that? Or even if we didn't have advice for each other, we had a sounding board to kind of just get it off our chest with somebody who was on our level or our peer. I think the great thing is Emily and I are slowly finding our feet over post Brady Williams, what our relationship looks like. And of course, the friendship is still there and super strong, but we're starting to, I suppose, bed into when we can call each other and what we talk about. I think I don't feel the pressure from my name being on the wall. I feel the pressure from the last project out of the stable. Last year, we opened the park for Jeremy King, which thankfully people seemed to love and I love, and I'm really proud of, to Gallery at Savoy. Now I'm feeling the pressure of, well, what's the next one out of the stable? And is it good enough? And, oh, have we lost our way? And, oh, is he churning out the same idea? And all of those negative thoughts that come into your mind. But I think that, as I say every day to myself and the team, we can only do our best on what we think is right for the project. I have to stop comparing myself to A, past projects, B, other designers that are in my field. Somebody once said to me, actually, I think it was Jeremy King, when the Delaunay and Balthazars were open, somebody asked him, are you worried about Balthazar's opening just around the corner? And he said, absolutely not. We're all in this together. They'll come to us. They'll go to Balthazar's. They'll like one of us. They'll hopefully come back to us. There's room for everybody. And I've sort of taken that on board with projects. If we lose out on a certain project we're pitching on, and I then find out who gets it, straight away there's a pang of, ooh, I want that. I don't want them to have it. But if I go back to another old mantra I follow, which is what's for you won't pass you. So if I was meant to win that project, I would have won that project. And we have at times pitched for projects and not won them. And a year later, they've come back to us because the timing was better or something didn't work out. So the pressure comes from always internally, need to work on that, but comes from almost worrying about what people think. But I have to try let that go. You have to just have conviction in what you're doing in the design.
And I love this idea that we're all in it together. And actually, as a design magazine editor, I'm in a part of the industry where inevitably it's always about celebrating the wins. Do you think we talk about failure enough as an industry?
No, I think we're very glossy on the nice pictures, the great final products, the great design at the end, all show, tell. I went to a talk by William Baker, an amazing stylist who did Kylie's tours and all of that. And I was thinking he was going to tell us all about the fabulousness of life on the road with Kylie. And he was so honest in actually everything that went wrong. There was very little about the success. And to his point, he was like, you can see the success. Watch the show or watch the outfits or see the photo shoots. The success is there. But actually, the road to the success and the failure is what he wanted to talk about, because that's what gets the great projects. Reworking the banquette design in the restaurant 25 times because it's still not working. The mistake on the leather that it's scratching and it's not being treated right. It's all of those things that we have to work through to get to the final result. The women and men dancing on the walls of the Savoy, the first trial of that was painted about 14 times with different paint colours to get us to that kind of soft blush, peach-toned hues that I personally think are the best. But it's all of that behind the scenes that I think we need to embrace more. It's funny, I'm not very good on social media, but I'm not sure people want to see the great glossy picture of the park or the next Waldorf Astoria. Yes, of course they do. But I think they want to see us scribbling the thoughts of the first light and how that light became the light on the wall. I think people are much more interested in the journey to see how we got there.
I just finished jury duty, bear with me. And one of the interesting things that came up during that process was everyone talking about the fact, how do people leave this at the door at the end of the day? You know, judges, barristers and all of that. And it really made me think about this conversation coming up. And design can be such a personal discipline. You know, within the context of failure, if something isn't going well, can you park it? Can you leave it behind, or does it follow you home?
It follows you home. So it's a really interesting conversation that I'm having currently with my therapist.
I thought I was your therapist.
You are my therapist, my second one, but my first one, my primary source. But it's this really interesting conversation I'm having at the moment, which ties into Name Above the Door, which is the Shayne Brady at home and the Shayne Brady in the studio and the Shayne Brady, the brand. Something many people don't know about me is that there's no Y in Shayne. So I added the Y in later life. So my parents, of course, still write to me as Shayne without the Y. And for me, very much the Shayne without the Y is the Shayne at home. And the Shayne with the Y is the professional Shayne. But to go back to your point, separating the creative mind from the person, like any designer, we work in an industry where you can't just switch off at 6 o'clock. You don't turn the computer off at 6 o'clock and go home to your family, your partner, or whatever it is, because it's so ingrained within your actual DNA. So I think what's really hard is when there is failures or stress, not taking them home, which as a creative, you won't be very good at your job if you don't get downtime. Actually, not even as a creative. Anybody in any industry, if you're constantly working, you get nowhere and you don't perform the best. So it's like what we have here in terms of when the team go on holidays, it's like no checking emails, no checking Teams, no checking phones. You are off to reset. And I have to do it to myself too, which is really hard. So the week before last, I went away for a week and did not look at one email or one message or talk to anybody in the office. But I've come back feeling super regenerated, invigorated, creative. So I think back to my daily successes. One of those is trying at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever it be in the evening to go, that's it. I'll flick through a design magazine or I'll flick through a design book if I'm interested in it on that day, but I'm actually trying to read other things like The Courage to be Disliked. I just finished The Empire of the Elite, which is about Condé Nast and the growth of that company and then the decline of it. So I'm trying to read and look at things that aren't specifically the design of a restaurant or the design of a hotel. So I am switching off and getting, I suppose, nourishment of the brain in other areas.
And I guess taking yourself out of that design space, I mean, it doesn't even have to be some monumental failure, but I guess it allows you to put challenges and struggles into more perspective as well.
You just get so much more clarity. Problems that seem problems right now or failures that seem failures right now, by the time the sun comes up around the globe the next morning, you've had clarity. Because another thing I really believe in, I don't think I design. I think my subconscious designs everything. So what I like to do is be shown let's say, plans of some new restaurants we're designing or whatever it be shown it and then just walk away and see some imagery of it. And I believe over the next 2 days, the subconscious has designed the whole thing, because I can then come back into a meeting without not actually sat down with a pen and paper and said, right, now I must design this bar. I will come back to a meeting with the team and go, I was thinking we should do X, Y, Z. Giving yourself that space and that breathing room is actually designing. You're just not chaining yourself to a desk. I mean, and I have my best thoughts walking down the street or waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep and sitting on the balcony and looking at the London skyline or whatever it be. That's when the actual design comes.
We are going to talk more about your design process, but before that, a quick message. Powered by Mix Interiors, Mix Awards is the most important awards program for commercial interior design and architecture, celebrating the most groundbreaking projects, the most inventive products, and the people behind them. For more information on Mix Awards and Mix Awards North, the biggest nights in the design calendar, visit mixinteriors.com. So, Shayne, design. Now, earlier I mentioned this idea of the lone genius, the visionary figurehead leading a studio or a practice. I suppose I wonder if there's an element of self-confidence, maybe even ego, required in someone to lead a design studio, because you have to come in and essentially lead with this idea that what I am creating for this project is right. You need to have real trust in your own vision. So where does that confidence come from? Why is your vision the right one for a space?
Oh, I think that comes back to two things then. One is fake it till you make it. So I always thought for my 20s and 30s, I was always faking it. But something happened around 37 where I was like, no, you've got this. You do know what you're doing. And that comes a little bit with experience. But also I think something just switched in me on a personal level where I was like, and it's back to that point, it was sort of, I realized I'm a designer, true and true. And when I walk into a space, like before us recording this, I was at one of our sites this morning picking paint colors. I was sat there with the client going, no, you have to do it that color. And he literally did say, but why? And I was like, because I know I'm right. He was like, okay, I trust you. And I suppose I trust me. There's an extent that that is ego, but not in a Devil Wears Prada throwing the coats on the tables ego. It's more a conviction in one's own vision for the space. And I think that I have been given a talent that allows me to see a space when it is currently concrete blocks and crumbling plasterboard and electric cables. And I can see what this space will look like in 8 to 12 weeks.
Is that informed by some kind of design philosophy? Do you have a particular design approach? And if so, what is that? What does that look like?
With the studio and the team, it's not over until it's built. And it's not about always changing things, but if something is intrinsically feeling wrong inside me on a project, I have to say it to the team. The other philosophy I have is very much, and I think it comes as no surprise, I love history and heritage. And I'm not about creating a splash for now. And I think sometimes people say to me, or PR agents say to me, well, what are we doing that's now and trendy? And I'm like, nothing. My design philosophy is, will this still look great in 20 years? I'm trying to make design decisions and spaces that will hold their legacy and be there well into the future.
What does that mean from a practical standpoint in terms of actual aesthetics? For example, how do you bring that sense of heritage and history into a project? Can you illustrate it for us a little bit?
I think the type of materials that are chosen. I think playing with the scale. I think not doing something that feels gimmicky. You know, if we go back to the Savoy, I really struggled with placing onto a building or a room that had been there for 125 odd years some new vision. But we have to. That was our job. And so some would say I could or should have just painted all the paneling in a nice color, which I could have done. And we could have done a nice little gilt edge detail to it and it would have been lovely. But for me, that feels pastiche in that there I'm just recreating what sort of was by embracing the paneling, but adding on this soft silhouette painting around the entire building. We've made it modern and into the next 20, 30, 40 years of the room, but we've not disregarded the past. So I think it's about making clever choices that aren't done for the sake of being controversial, or looking at black and white marbling that is in the lobby of the Savoy, but doing it in a cleaner, simpler fashion that feels a little evolved from where it was at. But we've not decided to put in whatever everybody's doing right now. I don't know what they're doing right now, like burgundy red, Rosa Levante marbles. We still are respectful of what the heritage should be.
And that passion for set design and theatre, I'm just wondering if that comes in any way. I've been to the gallery at the Savoy. It's an absolutely magnificent space and the dancers careening around the walls. And it isn't gimmicky, it isn't pastiche, but there is something of the theatre in it. And I wonder if you do bring that into your design today.
I think all of our designs have a theatricality. If you look at Bob Ricard's City, there's a theatricality in the dramatization of the lights and the ticker tape and all of that. If you look at the Aubrey and the Mandarin Oriental, it's almost like 6 or 7 different room sets from a great play or novel by like Agatha Christie. Do you know what I mean? It's an old gentleman's townhouse. So there's definitely a sense of theatre within our designs. I think that, I sort of love the drama of it. I also love the fact that you can affect somebody's mood and day with our designs, and you can make them feel $1 million and let them have the best night or day of their lives and be part of that backdrop of what's happened that day. Because when you think about it, everything happens in a restaurant or bar, from like the first date to somebody deciding either to the person or not they're divorcing, to signing the biggest contract of your life, to family get-togethers, to 60th birthdays. Everything of life happens in a restaurant bar. So it really is the backdrop of life and the backdrop of a stage. And back to Les Mis, that whole stage set was the backdrop of the French Revolution. So it's a very different backdrop, but it's the same. And I love that.
You talk about the team a lot. And it brings me back, I suppose, to the point that I mentioned at the top about this idea that any project takes a village. I'm wondering what you've learnt about being a leader.
Emotional intelligence. The biggest thing I think with being a leader is having emotional intelligence. So being able to walk into a room, either our room, our studio with my team, or walk into a room of contractors, lighting designers, painters, decorators, project managers. You need to be able to tap into where they are. So many people don't have that ability, and I think I'm blessed to have that ability. Designers are fragile, creative, beautiful humans, but they can have self-doubt, insecurity. I take myself into this category as well. They sometimes need love, they need reassurance, they need to be boosted up when they're feeling down. We also do an industry that can be, for some reason, ridiculously stressful, fast-paced, and so it can be quite hard to navigate that. So I think being able to tap into, kind of walk into the room and go, oh, X designer is definitely feeling on edge today. I'm going to pull them for a quick coffee walk around the block. To give them that reassurance, that 5 minutes can transform their entire week. So I think being able to tap into that is really important. Listening to them, realizing that they're people. They're not just there to bash out some drawings or do whatever and leave at 5 o'clock. They are your second family. And I make a real point, or I really try, and it's harder the bigger we get. We're up at 20 something now. I think building a personal relationship helps you be a better leader, and it helps them to grow with you. And I think you also lead by example. I'm not the type of boss that turns up once a week and expects to see 20 great designs and then leaves to go have martinis. If I'm leading with passion and conviction of wanting to get the design beautiful, that trickles down the whole way through the entire team. And so they jump on the train and they also want to do the best. And I feel super fortunate and lucky in that I have a team that all want to do the best for me, the studio and the design. They are all fully invested in wanting to do beautiful things.
And you're embarking on this new chapter with them. You mentioned at the top, it's scary, it's exciting. So what are you most scared about? And what are you most excited about?
I'm most excited about where the studio can go. We've done some international work. We're going more international. I've always wanted to have another smaller satellite studio, maybe Miami. I mentioned that before. I'm excited for that. And I'm also excited for the project sitting here right now. I don't know I'm going to design yet. I don't know what I'm going to design in 10 years' time, but that fills me with such excitement over what it could possibly be. So I think the unknown is giving me excitement and thrills, and it's feeling fresh and new again, as opposed to feeling like just doing the same thing.
Is that also what's scary then, the unknown?
So the unknown is what's scary in terms of, I feel the big thing that I felt since going solo is that on these little shoulders is all of these people that I employ, and I don't want to fail them. I want them to be able to come in to make a salary, have a nice life, design great projects. And so there's a lot of pressure there because there's a number of moving parts to make that work. But I feel a real affinity or loyalty to them because they have such a loyalty to me. So I want to make sure that they have jobs to work on. They have great careers. They're growing in their careers, which I think is also really important. And I think back to leadership, mentoring and seeing one of our junior designers become a senior designer, not even in our studio, in another studio, fills me with such pride that we were played a part in their journey. But the other thing I want to be really mindful of as we go forward is I don't want a design studio of 80 people. And that's not because I'm scared of the pressure, but it's kind of knowing who I am and where I want to go. I want this studio in London to be maybe 25 max. Yes, I do talk about Miami and Bangkok, but maybe they're 10 and 10. Maybe they're 8 and 8. Maybe they're only 4 and 4. I don't want to be sat in a boardroom every day just signing off salaries and new hires and dealing with HR issues. I want to be on site convincing the client that it's this color because of X, Y, and Z. Or I want to be sat brainstorming this new theatre adjacent project. So yeah, that's where I stand on the future.
It's been a wonderful chat, Shayne. You've taught me a couple of things. I love this idea that life isn't all about big successes.
No.
Sometimes it's about celebrating the small wins, and perhaps when I go home tonight, I'll be putting a couple of Post-its up on the fridge. So thank you, Shayne, for joining us.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you for listening to Things I've Learned. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you like and subscribe, and of course, tell your friends about it. And if you missed any episodes from season 1, you can catch up wherever you're listening to this. There's Patrick Schumacher from Zaha Hadid, Alias Lamy from Google DeepMind, restaurant designer Aphrodite Krasa, lots of juicy conversation to get into. We also film these conversations, so if you want to see us as well as hear us, head over to our website, mixinteriors.com, or find us on YouTube. Join me next time when I'll be joined by the founder of Interior, Sandrine Shine-Ferrin. Things I've Learned is hosted by me, Harry McKinley. This episode was produced by Nada Smiljanic, and the executive producer was Dan Jackson, with original music by Memoto. Things I've Learned is a co-production by Reduced Listening and Mix Interiors.